Great, you're in.
Are we missing them?
Okay, we're live.
Okay.
We're live.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call to meeting the second session of the Solar Ordinance Ad Hoc Committee meeting. Roll call. I am here. Mike Copine.
Here.
Chris Norberg.
Here.
Jim Sheeline.
Here.
And Bruce Forster,
Here.
pardon me. And Charlie Boonstra.
Here.
Pete Duffy.
He's not here.
He's not here.
Heidi.
And we had some visitors. We'll go ahead and get into that in just a minute. Let's, Dee was kind enough to put together the minutes from our last session, and you should have them, had them nailed out. Are there any additions or corrections to the meeting minutes? We'll stand approved as submitted. What I would like to do is recognize visitors before we get into our old business, new business. So I see Courtney. Courtney, are you able to, are you hearing? Yes. Can Courtney speak?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
There you are.
Good morning, Courtney.
Perfect.
Do you have anything for us before we get started?
Nope, I do not.
Okay. And I'm sorry, who is Jenny?
Hi, it's Jenny Monson Miller with National Grid Renewables. Can you hear me okay?
We can. And do you have anything for us before we get started this morning?
I don't, thank you.
Thank you. Becky Brenner. Keith?
Keith Bowman with National Grid Renewables.
Okay, anything for us this morning?
No, sir.
Amber Miller, National Grid Renewables, same.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, I've invited Alice Hinkle. She's our new renewable energy coordinator, also / secretary.
Hi.
Welcome aboard.
Yes, welcome.
Good luck.
Okay, so I think we'll dive in. In terms of old business, we did work through the ordinance. The key portion being the last meeting was the setbacks, and I did send out, we approved setbacks of 50 and 15, and we kept the setback from the foundation at 600. The setback for transformers was reduced to 500, and I did incorporate that language into the current ordinance as close as I could, and I sent that out for review. And I guess I would just ask, is there any comments on that, or do we think that is?
I guess I've got a question in regards to, okay, so it says setbacks, ground mounted SES shall have a setback for all equipment excluding fences. So the word excluding fences means that we're putting the fence on the property line, correct?
I think that is what we have to determine, I guess, in our discussion of screening today, because I think there are a couple of different schools of thought.
Then minimum of 50 feet from the front property line, 50 feet from side and rear property line in an agricultural district. What constitutes front?
And that's why we have a whiteboard.
Okay, all right, so we're gonna get to that.
So do you want to start drawing? Roads. Okay,
Well,
put a house here, property, front of the yard.
and the reason I'm asking this question, because this has bearing on when we get to the screening.
Front of the yard is this way, correct? Towards the road. Doesn't matter if the house sits. That's a bad rendition, right? Because the problem is which way the house sits. Because if the front door sits to the, let's assume this is north, right? The front door sits to the west, this is the front of the house. What if the front door sits to the north? Where's the front of the house? Would you, like, what's the clarification there?
Okay, but the thing of it is, Chris, is that this particular sentence doesn't refer to any residence. This isn't residence. This could be a bare parcel.
Yeah, the way I've taken it, Jim, and maybe we can clarify the language a little bit, is this is really the offset to the road that the property is on. So it's really more for
Okay, so you're saying-
for the,
Yeah, I'm saying a bare 80.
So we've got a bare 80 here. Where's the setbacks?
Yeah, okay, so here's an 80, and here's a road,
Okay,
and here's a road. And the reason why I'm doing this is my situation, right? So is this a side, or is this front? Or is this front and the side? So is there 50 feet past the here?
and you're saying there's no house on the east side?
No,
There's no houses?
No house. It's buried.
If I could say something, Jim, I would think they're both different roads unless that's a 90-degree turn on the same road.
Well, okay, let's be clear, Mike, let's be real. This is Dutch Road. And this is Walker.
Okay, so anybody that's on the north-south road
No, this is buried.
Go ahead, Mike.
would have a numerical address assigned to them by postal authorities for a mailing address, which to me would notify me that, maybe the front of the house is going to face that road. Although you've got different types of entrance doors for the alleged front of the house. Anything down on Dutch Road would have a different postal address, and I would think that anything that would face the road there would be the front of the house.
So,
That's just a,
but we're not, in that first two sentences, we're not talking about anything residential. There's no residence.
There's no houses on
There's
either side
no
of the road.
houses.
This is a bare 80, bare 80, bare 80.
But we're requiring, because
Can we put the whiteboard right here?
That means I gotta get up.
can you see the whiteboard? Courtney?
Just a second.
She just asked about this.
Or did she? Okay.
I'd like to call on Keith here in just a second.
No, that was Gotcha.
Right against.
oh, Bruce.
Back.
You can actually see that?
Courtney can see it.
Can you see that, Courtney? Can we farther back so we can all?
How far back can we go with that? Without tripping, hanging yourself in the whiteboard.
Is that too far back?
Let's see.
If I get out.
I can't see that. I'm sorry.
All right. What about highlight or the black marker instead of?
Chris, never mind.
Now I feel like I'm at home. Play a picture.
Stay on the right-hand corner. Put your call wherever you want to.
11:30.
So
Oh, there, that might be better.
A lot of glare.
I'm sorry.
You're
not alone, Michael.
Jim, if you read this, because of how the breaks in it, I don't know if yours shows the breaks too.
Yeah.
Okay, it includes a primary dwelling. So from here, that.
No, it breaks. So in an agriculture district or 600 feet from any foundation of a primary dwelling.
So the greater of the two.
Yeah, but if the dwelling's not there, we're
But then it's-
requiring this.
That's an agriculture district with a primary dwelling. The second part goes into 15 feet from the side property where non-residential property was 0 feet from the setbacks. So the first line that you're talking about does identify a dwelling. The second line, the SES setback, blah, blah, blah.
I don't read it that way. Mr. Attorney,
Which one is that?
Jim, if I may, where is the primary entrance to that section of property? Is there one?
well, it could be multiple.
Well, what I'm getting at is if there's a primary entrance, would that be a possibility of
To Becky.
being
Not
either?
necessarily. No, very, I mean, it could be anywhere.
I'll forward it to her.
And that could change. I mean, there's no such,
Oh, I
I mean,
understand.
it's just like, I got a Bear 80,
We're trying to get the basics, but
right,
anything can change, that's the.
oh, yeah.
I don't know if it would be a catch-all that you could do, where it would say, whatever side of the property faces a public highway, public road, or public property. I think that would be a more specific way of saying the front of the property.
I guess my question to you is the way that's written, Chris is saying that it refers to the residents. I'm saying, I read that we're talking about the setbacks in an agricultural district, whether or not there's any residences there. And then we talk about the 600 feet from a primary residence. It's two separate issues, and it's in one sentence.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I do play an attorney on TV.
Watch too much Law and Order.
So I guess in the big picture of things, are we? I mean, the setback from the front, I think, is intended for snow. I mean, it's really intended for the highway and for people driving on the highways and roads, whatever. And it has a practical piece of snow drifting and all of that. The idea was keep it at 50 feet and aesthetics as well, not right up to the, to the, where they'd be driving. So is the big picture, the 50 feet from road, essentially roads would be the same as front.
So instead of, but once again, so does it have to be 50 feet from a road and not make it front? Because it should be, does it need to be 50 feet from the road instead of trying to identify fronts and sides and backs and tops and unders and of the property, like identify the road as because in Jim's example here, where road touches on two sides.
Sure. I
It
think,
goes by the right of way. All through the county, there's right of ways on every parcel that touches the road, and that's where they would start, from the right of way.
Okay, so let me, I have a real problem with this because, okay, this is an 80, this is an 80. Again, no residences involved. Now, we clarified our 15-foot setback that if, and let's say it's 380s, 380s, boom, boom, boom. This is an 80 here. They're all participating. They're all participating in the project. Okay, so the way we've got this, the proposed language is that there's zero setback here. Zero setback. Then we got 50-foot setback here, 50-foot setback here, 50-foot setback here. And also rear. So this would probably be considered rear.
Is that
A 50% setback here.
because that's a non-participating owner?
No, these are all 380s are participating.
No, I'm saying to the north. They're not participating.
Yeah, but there's no road up there.
Yeah, it's just an 80.
That's just it's just 380s tied in. So now we've got setback, setback, setback. No setback here.
why is it 50 on the side?
Well, because I'm calling this front.
Yep.
you know, you gotta call something front and rear, because we have it in there that we're requiring a 50-foot setback front and rear. So it's 50-50. But this is cornfield,
But
and
that
there's
would-
no residences.
But that's where the 15 would kick in, if it's adjacent to just farmland.
Doesn't say that.
It does later on, it says that it can be reduced to 15.
If this guy waives it.
No,
No, if it's just agricultural.
as long as it's agricultural, you gotta read a little.
I read through it. Okay, all right, yep, you're right.
So where it's just butting up against agricultural use property, not the residential property, it would take it to 15. And
But do you understand my confusion?
yeah, it's not easy because they're not cookie cutter. You know, every project is a little different.
So if we're in an agricultural district, and what is an agricultural district, Mr. Forrester? Do we have a definition of that?
I think the zoning would.
The zoning of an ag
It'd be ag.
So ag one,
parcel.
Yeah.
But you have a residence on the A1 zone property, and what we're trying to capture is around the, say, mowed yard, the residence itself. We're trying to have obviously that's where the screening kicks in, that's where the offsets sit in, but where there's crops and agricultural use of the property, that's where it can be reduced to 15 feet.
Because there's
Okay.
no need for a buffer there.
Right.
There's no need for a screen, so you go 15 feet there.
okay, so 15, 15, 15.
Correct.
On three parcels, we're still 50 here, 50 here, and 50 here, 50, 50. Why, okay, again, no residences involved. Why are we 50, 50 here?
I would say it's because of roads.
That's a road.
And I'd say we need to tweak our language to explain that because it's not always front.
If there's a dwelling on a corner, there's two frontages. That's how,
Okay, I don't want to get into residences,
okay.
this
so
is bare ground.
I would
We're,
consider two roads, two frontages.
Because D, if I wanted to build a house, or a shop, how far off of the road do I have to be
In ag,
in ag?
25 feet.
Was it 25 feet, Jim?
well, I'm just questioning on what we're trying to do. You know, what, on bare dirt. And, you know, we've got a road, but remember, the right of way is here. The center line is here. So we've got 60 feet on a typical township road. So 30 feet, and we're so from here, we're gonna go 50 feet to the first panel, and so we've got the fence along the right of way. And then we've got 50 feet between the right of way fence, the right of way line, which is where the fence will be. And we're requiring a 50-foot setback from that fence. And how big is this room? How long is this room? I'm just questioning what are we trying to do?
I'm gonna correct myself on that question here.
Okay.
So front property line in an agricultural zone, if it's a township road, you have to be 60 feet from the center of the roadway. On a county highway, you have to be 75 feet from the center of the highway, and on a state highway, it's 50 feet from the right of way.
So you can't put a solar panel, in my opinion, if I can't put a house, our ordinance has to at least include the solar panel in those. Is that right? Does that make?
Okay, so 60 feet from the center line of a township road,
Right,
75 feet from the county road, center line of the county.
right.
60 times.
For a dwelling, for a primary
For a
dwelling.
dwelling,
For
correct?
structure. Is that right?
For any structure.
Sure.
So, well, why don't we just follow, why are we trying to reinvent the wheel here?
We're just trying to get to a definition that is,
I know.
can be applied to each situation. So I think that's where we're at. We're not, that 50 feet is not much different than what that is. I make it the same. and I
Yeah,
think
but you see what I'm saying, David, is if we've already got something that's well established and understood, why are we changing?
Because that's a structure. You have to identify if the solar panel is actually a structure. Sorry, you have to identify if the solar panel is a structure.
So
Because the fence, we can, and as we continue to have included there, the fence is gonna go right on the property line. If you're talking moving the solar panel,
Well, I'm trying to be reasonable have a reasonable ordinance. And I'm also trying to understand, are we treating, and I think we just answered, we're treating solar differently than any other thing. And I wonder why. Bruce, you,
My quick question on that, and I'm referring to you because you've been on that board, but when the Farm Bureau calls a solar farm an agricultural use because it's harvesting the sun, then does it actually become a structure, or is it part of quote unquote a farm?
Like a row of corn.
Like a row of corn, because it's not a permanent structure. It can be pulled out of the ground, it can be moved, and it can be changed. So is it a permanent structure or isn't it a permanent structure? Is it agriculture? In some people's opinion, it is, other people's it isn't. But you clarified that last time from having been on the board of the
and I wasn't, and I want to make clear that I was not involved. I was not involved in the
No.
discussion of the latest policy change.
I understand that, but that was brought up to us, as we were working on the first couple of solar farms, that the Farm Bureau had changed their whole attitude about that they call it harvesting the wind and they call it harvesting the sun. It's still harvesting, and it's still they now call it an agricultural use. And that's a total change,
okay,
I would say, in the last 5 or 6 years.
so if that's the case, then you don't need a fence and it can go right up to the road and you can farm it right to the right of way.
No. You
But it's
have
the
to
same
have
as corn.
You have to have a fence because of the
National Electric Code.
So it's not corn, so I don't have to fence my corn. I'm arguing devil's advocate, right, Bruce?
No,
Like,
I
as a
understand.
farmer, and I'm an agronomist, so when you talk about harvesting light, if I'm on, you guys all know where I sit as far as solar panels. If I'm sitting on the other side of the fence where you guys are, this is, your argument is just the same argument that I keep pushing. It is just harvesting sunlight to create energy to put food into my belly. That is all that corn does. That's all that solar does too. So my argument is, until we have to, if we don't need a fence there, then yeah, I think the argument is valid. But as long as there needs to be a fence there, because it is an electrical source, we can argue, we can say that it's hypothetically, it's the same thing as corn, but it's not the same thing as corn. So I think there's a give and a take there.
The point I think Jim is making is whether you set back the panels 50 feet from the property line, they already, as the applications have come in, they're already basically set back 20 feet from that fence anyway, so that they have a drive all the way around the property and through the panels. And that's, as Jim pointed out, and as what we talked about the other day on 300-foot setbacks, it's, if you're an agronomist, you want to use as much of that land as you can so that you don't take more land out of production to get the same amount of energy.
Any breakdown on who is harvesting the sun, who is harvesting the wind, and where it's going? I understand that any property owner that's involved in it, I might be confused too. I don't see it as anybody that's involved in it as being the harvester. They're merely leasing or running the ground or however the agreement was put out. Who's the harvester here?
Well, how's that different than a cash rent arrangement, Mike? There's no difference there. I mean, I rent my farm to you. I get crippled and I rent my farm to you. Who's the harvester? You're the harvester. I'm the landowner. But I'm still deriving income from that lease to sustain my business.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
I'll just ask you to throw it out there. What would you propose that it be, Jim?
Well, you know, part of what I want to do here, I want to make sure that we're not putting in confusing language where it doesn't necessarily need, and that we can also use language that's already existing. If we've got existing language in regards to, setbacks, and I struggle with this because I agree with what Bruce's point is completely. If it's a farm, it's a farm. And why are we changing things up from what we already have? So the question then comes back to what you two are asking is this a structure like a shed, machine shed, a livestock barn, or is this, to your point, is this a row of corn?
So I think, to your point, we have language in there. If you go through multiple ordinances, right, to kind of get what it says, the 60, the 50, the 50, right? I think to appease people like Mike and I who are want it all in an easy read one-page document, can we just take that information and move it right into our solar ordinance?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Hours. Kennedy has.
Yep, go Courtney.
Courtney, help us out.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I agree with what Jim's saying. I think we need to have a simple rule. And I think that's essentially what you're saying, Chris. We need a simple rule that has an easy application. So if you look at that spreadsheet, whether we keep the same, wordology that we used in the previous ordinance, we just need to either say we're setting it back from the property line, from the right of way, something simple that we could apply in all scenarios. I don't think that determining who the harvester is, I don't believe that's within the purview of this committee or even the county board. I just think we need to focus on what the rules are, what we want them to be, and try to make them as simple so that it's an easy application.
Agreed. So I believe it should be 50 feet from which was it'd probably be the greater of them would be the 50 feet from the right of way of the state, right?
Well, what would be helpful? Dee, can you easily print off what the setbacks are for within an agricultural district real quick so that we can see those in front of us so that we can compare? Everybody, she can. She's got the key.
She does.
Because I think if you look at it being a township, a county, or a state road, we're probably squabbling over 5 feet, right? In the whole grand scheme of things, like 5 to 10 feet.
Well, I'm also thinking of, because these folks are gonna be, not Chris, not you anymore, but these folks are gonna be the ones going out there and
Enforcing it,
enforcing.
correct.
And if we've got this Byzantine mix of stuff,
So
I'm just making their job hard.
I would agree. I would propose that when she gets back with her information on setbacks for a residential structure, we take the greatest of them and just call it that. Because that way, when they go out to enforce it, they don't have to worry about whether it's a state road or county road or a township road. It's 50 feet from the right of way. It's 60.
Well, that's not, but then you're changing things up. If there's differences within, what we already have,
There's reason for it.
there's,
And it's,
we have a
If I could.
Mhm.
The rationale as a planner, the rationale behind that for a permanent structure is so if the road is widened, it's not part of this, it's not part of the setback. You know what I'm saying? It's not within the,
You don't have to move this.
exactly, for a permanent structure. That's why you don't build a house. That's why there's the setback from the state right of way, the county road, those kinds of things. The solar panels are a temporary structure. Like a
Temporary
shed,
for 30 years.
but it's temporary in that there's no foundation
Sure.
as opposed to a house, which is a structure with a permanent foundation.
So your point is that if there was a widening of the road, it's not a big deal for the solar farm to take out a row of, or, a portion of the,
Right. It's a temporary
Make that
structure
line.
that they can be moved without. It's right, exactly. But what I'm saying is that that's the rationale for those types of setbacks. In Wisconsin, they have, it's a little bit different, but every state is different, how they classify that. And it's basically so that if the road is widened, they don't have to go through and buy a bunch of people's homes because they'll be within what they call the clear zone.
I have a question about permanent and temporary fixtures. If we've got a facility that's utilized for a battery backup, they're gonna have to be encompassed in the temperature's gonna have to be controlled. And then the grid point that they connect from the solar panels to the grid point, is that considered a temporary or permanent fixture? I guess to add to that, during the decommissioning time, is that substation taken out?
Yes, it is, as I understand it.
Okay, what about any battery backup setup or anything? Is that considered temporary then also? Is that going to be removed with the decommissioning?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, he was kind enough to give us the agricultural zoning setbacks as they currently read in our for agriculture is 15 feet from side and rear lot line, 60 feet from center line of roadway for township roads, 75 from county highways from the center line, and state highways 50 feet from the right of way line. For consistency, and I think I hear the general consensus is we should be consistent between ordinances. I would see just taking these setbacks and adding them to the verbiage we have for explaining roads. And we could actually just reference these from, reference this ordinance from the other ordinance rather than incorporate them, or we could incorporate them.
I would incorporate it to make it, once again, like Courtney, and I think we both agreed, make it a one-stop shop ordinance that you don't have to look for everything, so.
You just have to be careful if it changes, or you change it in both places, but it's not
But
that
it's the
hard.
same thing that we have to deal with ordinances all the
Sure.
time. We're changing them.
So the idea would be to add this to our ordinance explaining setbacks from roads.
So
And
that would-
leaving everything else as is.
I can't think of, sitting here at the moment, I can't think of why there would be an objection to that, other than the concept that we're making solar, understanding that they're temporary, we're making them adhere to a permanent structure. And do you see any issue with that?
No, and
Charlie?
the reason for it is you're comparing, as we did earlier, comparing this type of solar farm to any other type of farm, corn, beans, whatever it may be. And it's not. There's reasons that these things are in place. There's reasons they have fences. There's reasons they have all the rules in place that they are. Because if you don't, there's a lot of security. There's a lot of liability that comes along with it. It's not like corn where you take it out every year. It's there. It's gonna stay there for 30 years. I know you can remove them at some point, but they're gonna be there for a while.
I agree.
And we're not treating it any different than we would like the wind farm. Wind farms have their own setbacks as well.
Thing of it is with the windmills, you're talking about handful structures within a project where we're dealing with a lot of roads and a lot of frontages and it's just a different deal
Yeah.
altogether. A lot more complexity you can get involved in.
My proposal is just, it's a different setback than you would have for a cornfield.
Right. Mr. Chairman, I guess if we're in agreement, do we want to do this by consensus, or do you want a motion to amend what we did last week? What would you prefer?
Dave, I have a question, just to clarify the cloud on my head. If I could impose on Mr. Henkel with the experience, do we have in the ordinances any place a definition of permanent or temporary structure? When it becomes a permanent structure versus a temporary?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dee, I didn't see you sitting next there. I would have included you on this. So there's nothing that differentiates, because to me, if you put a structure on property, concrete's in the ground, I would think that that would become a permanent fixture.
And the argument here, Mike, is that there's no concrete in there. Correct? Me if I'm wrong. That's their argument, is there's no concrete in those I-beams. But as I look at it, when we've referred to it multiple times as a structure, this is a building, this is a structure setback. I think everybody can kind of win.
Okay, let me define it a little bit more in detail then. We have a grid point. Those just aren't beams driven down in the ground. We usually have concrete to support some of that. If not,
There is no concrete.
No concrete at all. That's been part of every single solar farm that we've done so far, that there will be no concrete poured in anymore. It's strictly,
including a battery backup facility.
that may be a pad, but it won't be.
That will be a pad that they probably have to dig up in the decommission cost, but that's the whole purpose for,
Okay,
the conversation we're having right now, that's, as we talk about right
The
away.
inverters are not near the road. The inverters are well within the project.
500 feet.
The panels are the ones you're talking about. Those are just piles driven into the ground.
okay, where are we then as far as the grid point connection of all of the solar panels and also any battery backup that would be put in
The substation?
to any of the boundaries or anything that we're even talking about? I've seen a couple of situations there on setbacks as far as inverters and transformers, and I've seen the term transformers omitted or inadvertently left out. I'm just trying to picture some of this stuff. We don't need to go into that technicality right now, but I'm just trying to picture it and understand it as Jim was trying to understand.
Go ahead, Jim, sorry.
No,
I think what you're getting at, we need to address here after the right of ways. I think that's the second part of, so I think you're putting the cart before the horse just a little bit, Mike. But I think we need to get the right of way set on a bare property and then the next part. Because if it's a bare property, I can care less where to put the inverter, right? If you want to put it in the middle of, they're going to put it 500 feet off the road.
Or you might not, and I understand there probably isn't much noise from the group. I don't know. I don't live next to one. I don't want to live next to one. So there's no control on where they put the connection point or the grid point or battery backup. They can just randomly go out and put it 2 feet from the fence or something like that. I mean, we're talking control over trees, height of trees, where the trees are planted. I'm trying to get some things into perspective.
If you read past it, it says no less than 500 feet from a residence is what Dave sent out or what was sent out. So it is in there. That's got to be greater than 500 feet from a residence.
and then if we adopt the agricultural zoning setbacks within the solar ordinance, Mike, then that inverter couldn't be 2 feet from the fence because it would have to, they would have to adhere to the setbacks that we already have.
Okay.
So it still has to be
So it would be treated like any other structure.
So if we were to add this verbiage to what we have already with the 50s, how does that look?
Well, you could say something like a ground mounted SES shall have a setback for all equipment excluding fences in accordance to the agricultural zoning ordinance, which is blah, 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 blah.
great. And then the next sentence, and then the next sentence we get into the houses.
Right.
Do not don't make it a sentence, Robert.
So this would,
Education.
so like another sentence. So this would take out the 50 feet from the front and side.
Down to the comma of an agricultural district, and you would drop that or 600 feet from main foundation because we're going to add that back as the next section.
Because then it would include, because how we have it written now, it would be 50 feet from, so now.
Charlie, do you want us to take a stab at the language, or do you want, you get the concept and you
I thought you
do the
did a good job
language?
the first time. I don't know why I'm trying to.
Because
I just don't want to usurp your authority as the resident attorney for the county.
I'll chime in, you know I'm not shy.
I think you've got it right there. Now I think you build in, for the second sentence, is you build in a house, right?
Or
So
the next paragraph.
for the next paragraph, and that says 50 feet from, whether the house is here, it still has to be 50 feet from this property line. Say this property line goes 400 feet this way, right? No, 600 feet this way.
Well, let's get don't get ahead of ourselves, Christopher.
Okay, so what do you want, Jim?
Well, let's get this, let's get the language
Oh,
adopted.
you want the actual language of this one? Okay.
I mean, what I.
Because that's what Dave's asking.
Yeah, what
I
I
think what you said is
What I would say is if you just take out the 50 feet, I'm concerned that with the property where people live, you're maybe, these setbacks are pretty small. when you take 75 feet from the center line of a road that's 60 feet wide.
But that setbacks for any residence comes later. This is just bare dirt. We're talking just bare dirt.
Bare
In
dirt.
that first sentence, that's,
See, the way I read it was, this is residential setbacks, and then I would add the, we reduce that requirement. This is the minimum. And then you put a statement in to reduce it where you're next to ag, and I would put another statement in to reduce it when you're next to only a road. And use these setbacks for the road, so that you're protecting the homeowner per se, and then you're making exceptions to that so that the homeowner's lot is protected and clear that it's protected by the 50 feet.
but don't you think it flows better, David, if you deal with bare dirt first and then come to residences and then, you section it off that way?
I see what you're saying.
I tend to think of it the other way, because the controversy we have is, are we protecting our non-participating landowners? That's the emphasis I hear, and that's what I would, my personal preference would be to address that first. So that's the first thing you read. Not that so that you have the protection of the non-participants up front, and then you make exceptions so that we're not wasting farmland to that primary, more conservative.
So you're just
setbacks.
saying, let's deal with the resident setbacks first in this section, and then have what we have consensus on at the end of the paragraph,
Yep.
or the end of the section.
Correct, that would be my preference, because I think it makes the right emphasis. Our main concern, well, we're trying to address both concerns, but our non-participating landowner.
So then you would start actually with that 500-foot setback for the residence?
600 foot.
I'm looking at this, I guess it counts like a second paragraph with that strike out setbacks from rears transforming along 500, or you will for that.
My inclination was just to add it after the 600 feet found from a foundation of primary dwelling, and then talk about an exception for setbacks to roadways, and then the exception to non-residential property, or you can flip-flop that with a non-residential property crops pasture at 15 feet, and then you can say where it only adjoins a roadway, we will follow the county ordinance for, and then you could list those setbacks.
Okay. So as long as we have what you want the setbacks to be, I think we can arrange it however we want.
Sure.
Just as long as we know what those are going to be.
So I guess from the group, we're okay with the 50 and 600 and 15 as it's stated. We would like to add an exception for roadways, where we're only butting up against roadways that would be handled per the township roadway setbacks, or not township roadways, but different roadways for the county agricultural zoning setbacks.
Correct.
Dave, I do agree with your opinion as far as taking care of the residents, because it would be.
Well,
I don't think it's fair to them, because if you don't want it, I think we're willing to work something out to that effect. So I agree with what you're saying right there.
So what I guess I would make a motion is that I think the only change that we're making is that we didn't define roadways, and I think we could be unnecessarily misusing, some good ground that we could capture without hurting the residents. So I would propose that we add this language to that statement, and I'll take a stab at the wording later on. We don't have to dig in the dirt here for that, but I'll take a stab like you did before to do that. I guess I would make a motion that we believe that that's the only thing that we're missing here with the setback discussion, and then I can send that out and we can approve it at a later point.
Okay, so I need to understand then, what's the point of the language of the 50 feet?
The 50 feet is against a property. So, correct?
It's a minimum.
A minimum of 60 or 50 feet. So here, let me,
Yeah,
can I draw a picture?
absolutely.
I love drawing. This is in 2 years.
That black marker needs to be new.
Yep. So same scenario, but we're gonna put a house or a property here
Okay,
with a house there,
okay,
okay? So from here to here, let's assume is 100 feet. This is the foundation. Our ordinance right now says 600 feet, so they can't start until out here. Say from here to here is 200, so they gotta go 500 this way, they gotta go 400 this way. But now let's say from here to here, it's a long property, this is 600 feet, right? We at least have to go 50 feet off of this. That's what it says.
It'll be a minimum.
They're still gonna keep in that 15 feet switch. You've got the, can you reduce the 15 feet then?
The 15 would apply where you're bumping against actual ag use crops and that type of thing. Yes, I would keep it. I think that better uses the ground and it doesn't impact the non-participant.
Now, remember, at any time, this person can waive all their rights and put it 15 feet away from their property. At any point, they can do that. So if this was your house, you're gonna put it 15 feet away, more than likely. If it's my house, I want it 400 feet away. If it's Dave's house, he might concede and be like, I want it 200 feet away.
The property owners can
If the property owners,
negotiate whatever they want.
once again, try to sell the house and the next person comes in, doesn't want it there, well, they're not gonna buy that house.
There's some Zoomers that may want to.
Okay,
Oh,
Adam Luz.
okay.
That's how I do that.
I think we're at a good point. Adam?
I apologize. I made the comment, it seemed as though there was input from solar developers or their lawyers in this meeting, and I didn't know that residents were going to have an opportunity to speak, so I appreciate coming off mute. But these, I would really like, I mean, there's a lot of conversation right throughout the meeting, but I would really like to see the fence included in when you reference setbacks, whether it be from the roadway or from the resident's property. Mr. Sheeline referenced kind of simplification, and I feel like the panels have to stay inside the fence. The fence should be the starting point of the setback. I think that's all I've got for now. I would let Courtney, she had her hand raised as well.
And I think as the next subject that we will be addressing is the screening. And that fence location is very much a part of that discussion. So we welcome whatever comments you have on that. Right now, I think the assumption is that the fencing is on the property line and that screening would be behind it. But that could also be talked about in screening. So Courtney, did you have something for us? Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. I would just ask, when we're talking about setbacks, if it was possible, what I've seen in other counties' ordinances is for an adjacent non-participating homeowner, if they agree to waive some of the setback requirement, I would ask that we plug that in to whatever the setbacks be. But we still have a minimum. You know, we can't have it right next to their property, but that's what I've seen in other ordinances. And I'd like to see that included here. To speak to Adam's point real quick about that fence included in that setback, I just don't think that that's possible. I think you're going to open up a whole different can of worms involving the county. So if you have this fence setback, you're going to have boundary line disputes with adjacent neighbors. You're going to have claims for adverse possession, which I understand, you know, the county may feel like, so what, that's the developer's problem to maintain and keep that clear, but that's going to snowball. So if you have an adverse possession claim, you're actually going to bring in Wendy's office to weigh in, and you're going to use county resources to fight that. So I think you're starting down a slippery slope where you're going to get more litigious later on in the future. So I think the fence has to stay on that property line for what that's worth.
So, Dave, can I comment on that?
Yes, go ahead.
So I've also been asking people, I probably asked a dozen people what they believe in this. And given them this scenario right here that sits in front of us, this is my home property as I look at it. And every single person that I've asked said there's no reason why that fence should be there. Everybody says that fence should be 600 feet away from your house with screening, trees, evergreens, shrubbery in front of it, between my house, shrubbery, fence, solar panels, 600 feet away. So I understand that where the solar company's coming from, I understand where the landowner's coming from, but as I talk to citizens and residents of the county, overwhelmingly, they say, well, if you're gonna have that ordinance in place, it makes sense for it to include the fence. So I'm echoing what the people that I represent are saying, that it should be included.
And I respect that. I certainly understand that, but I could today or tomorrow in Ag 1 district, I could put up a chain link fence and not have to worry about setting it back off my neighbor's property as it stands right now. If you want to, I would suggest to make the effects of it less harsh, you know, research or check into whether a woven wire fence could be utilized so it looks more like a cattle fence or livestock fence. It's less intrusive and I think more aesthetically pleasing.
Agreed, but I think as our ordinance is written, that we require a national electrical fence, that they require a change, correct?
Correct.
So
yep.
Unless we're gonna go down that path and probably spend another 6 hours doing this, talking about fence, I think right now we're probably in an agreement that we're gonna leave it where it's at, but I'm definitely open to that opinion.
Well, I think we did end up just. Go ahead.
If I could, the substation has to be surrounded with the chain link and barbed wire. If we move to the woven wire ag fence, it has to be taller, but it is allowed.
Without barbed wire.
Yeah, but it does have to be taller, so that is an option. It has to be at least 7 feet.
So 1 foot taller.
Yeah.
So good point.
But because it's sold in 2 foot increments, it's typically gonna be 8 feet. So yeah. So just keep that in mind. But it is an option. So it would be an 8 foot tall fence. Yeah, and we did agree to it on Alpena.
I was gonna say, I thought you had done that on.
So yeah. So just so you are aware, it would be an option.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So my heartburn with this language, and I appreciate Chris's picture, which I think is an excellent picture, but I'm having a real hard time getting that picture into the way I read this, because I think, see, to me, we're going back and forth the 50 feet from the front property line, 50 feet from the side and rear property lines. I think that language is in reference to the parcel that's being built on, and then we talk about the parcel of a non-participating landowner. So because the 50 feet, I mean, the 50 feet frontage on this is here. This is the front of that parcel. Well, we're not doing a setback here.
No, because that's the property. That's a non-participating property owner.
Correct. Do you see what I'm saying? The language, if we're talking about,
You can't build it in my yard, Jim.
I know, I don't want to.
Right.
And I don't expect that. I'm trying to
I like what you got here, but I don't think we.
So you have accessory, so what about if we change, and this is
You
my,
see what
this
I'm
is my
saying?
issue, this or should be and. What if I change that or to and?
But that still doesn't get us,
Okay, so.
so 50 feet here, are we talking, are we talking, which parcel are we talking the setback
We're
of the
talking
50
from a
feet?
primary dwelling. So what if we move primary dwelling up here to setback of all equipment excluding fences against a primary dwelling, a minimum of 50 feet from the property, blah, 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 and 600 feet from the foundation. So primary dwelling, you want to identify primary dwelling.
Okay, now I think we're getting, I think we're getting there, because if you do that, then we're talking about here, here, and here.
Correct. So you identify in the sentence that's
Okay.
primary dwelling.
Can you say that again?
Yes.
Because I think you got there.
So a ground mounted SES shall have a setback for all equipment excluding fences around a primary dwelling of a minimum of 50 feet from the front of the property line and 50 feet from the side and rear of the property lines in an agriculture district and 600 feet from from any foundation.
You could drop the front property line, because now you're talking about that parcel. And we're not building a setback off of the front property.
No, because here's the other part.
Okay.
Nope,
All right.
because here's the other part.
Okay, go. I just gotta understand.
But it fills it in. Let's assume this is the property. This is also going to solar, right?
Ah, okay. Yep,
But,
yep. I
but
wasn't
50
thinking across
feet-
the street.
But 50 feet would include your setback from the township. So it would go back off of this
Yeah, but that's
50 feet from the right of way.
from a state highway. It could be as low as 60 feet from the center line.
So.
But you're going, your
It needs to be
600-foot setback also goes across the road.
Your 600-foot setback also goes across the road. So you're absolutely right. So is it a catch-22?
All right,
Because the problem
so
is, what happens when the property is literally here, and this is 600, 600, 600, 600, right? Right. And then I need to get, like, where this picture's here.
Right.
So now I gotta put a road, and I gotta be at least 50 feet off of the other side.
Courtney, Adam, Jenny, you guys see that?
Yeah, do you understand?
There's too much of a glare to bring it closer.
The dual-sided whiteboard.
Let me just add, because I had sent this out originally without the 50 feet in there because, and my thinking was the 600 feet was more conservative and was really addressing the personal residence of the, and in a conservative way. So I left the 50 feet out, but since we had approved 50 and 15, I thought that, including that would be the minimum.
60 feet.
So your 50 feet on the front of the property line, if it's up against the road, is only the road. So I propose that your 50 feet on the front of the property, in the scenario that I gave you, probably should be 100 feet.
What does it matter? You're 600 feet from the foundation.
Correct, that's if the house is on the road. What if the house is down a lane and it's 600 feet from the road?
Then it shouldn't matter.
Then it shouldn't matter. So then when you cross the road, then you can put it
For this,
per this.
yeah,
Okay.
I think.
So really, what
I'm throwing out scenarios.
I know, that's what we're here for. So are we saying, are we saying that
Yes.
the word front on the 50 feet should be taken out?
Well, I would say, I guess the question I would have in the scenarios we're talking about, if we were to strike the 50 feet altogether,
Where is there a scenario where we wish we had the 50 feet in there?
yeah,
That's
correct.
my question.
Correct.
And
And that's why I put it back in there. It's like, is there a protection that we're removing by, the 600 feet is the conservative control for the homeowner. there, and that's, I think, correct. I think that's a good number. I think that provides a lot of visual protection for that homeowner, and it's not overly onerous to the developer because it's just that one spot in the whole development.
I think you leave it in there just as a redundancy. If there is a scenario that we can't think of, ink is cheap, paper's cheap, but I honestly can't think of a scenario where it would make a difference. But I truly cannot with the 600 feet from a foundation.
So I think we're back to just adding the roadway clarifications, correct?
And
Well, we'd be taking out that front language, the 50 feet. The only thing that I can think of, it would be if a non-participating landowner had, say, 10 acres, had a 10-acre lot, which is not uncommon, or 5 acres. Oh, I'm sorry. You had one of these rural farm lots. That, and you have 5 acres, and I'd have to do the math, but the frontage extends more than 600 feet from the house.
and then you've got a road there, but
I'm trying to think, is there a road or is there?
Well, the road has to be somewhere. You have to get to the house somehow. So you drive down to 600.
The entrance could be on the other side of the road entrance could be on the one, it really doesn't matter. Let's say that there's not a road and it's just a property line. Are we saying that we want 50 feet of setback from that? Okay.
I got what you're saying. I think you.
All right, let me take a stab at this.
You got a winding lane on the left table.
Oh, here. Yep, I got it. Okay, this is the property line.
That's a property line, not a road.
So this is just a property line. So, and here's the primary residence. So you've got a 600-foot setback going across this property line that has to be accommodated. But the 600-foot setback ends here. This could be construed, as I read this, is this construed as frontage?
Or is it side?
Or is it side? Or is it subject to 50 feet setback from this property line then? Is that what we're doing?
Yes, it's subject to 50 feet here because it shouldn't be 15, it should be 50. And then it should be 50, and then we go up like this, right? So, because this would be you'd have to get to 600 feet here.
Yeah, so
you leave it in. Yeah, whatever. Leave the 50 in.
So you're saying that 600 feet on the side, the back, and the other side, 600 feet to the fence or to solar panel?
It was to the solar panels, what it said. It was to the solar panels, what it was before.
Be back to the fish.
Can you turn it around?
I can. So we have an oblong parcel line.
Mm-hmm.
The lane's coming in over here. This is just a property line. Here's the primary residence. So you've got your 600-foot setback. Of course, the developers just swear that up. But then you have this part here that is outside the 600-foot setback of the primary residence. Is our language saying that this requires a 50-foot setback? Is that what we're saying?
All right. Another question comes into mind, and it's in the maintenance of the whole facility around it, along the fence and everything. they're talking about a 25 foot, if I remember right, I could be wrong with the figure. Then there's another 575 feet from the end of those panels to the fence for maintenance purposes, so that they can be cosmetically controlled and taken care of during the time this whole facility is up. Where are we at with that?
Because that's the question right now, Jim. In that scenario, where does the fence go? That's the $1 million question.
If we go 600 from foundation or wherever you want to go to, with the solar panels, we're going to lose another 25 feet according to the alleged care and maintenance of that situation. So now we're dropping again down to 570 feet or 75.
Where would you think the fence would go in this scenario?
Fence is on the property. Fence is always gonna be on the property.
See, and I think that's where Mr. Copine and I are, is we believe that the fence should be included out to here. Because now, like, if you put the fence right there, your first solar panel is right here, is 600 feet away. We now, regardless, you're still having 600 feet of dead, useless.
Who's gonna maintain that if it isn't inside the fence?
Right.
Who's gonna maintain if it is inside the fence?
The developer.
The developer will. But if it's outside the fence,
Can we put it in our ordinance that the developer still has to maintain that?
no.
Why not?
We have certain things that are in place now as far as noxious weeds or stuff like that. We have, an unexpected growth of horse weed or something like that.
And they're maintaining that inside their fence. So the fence needs to be out to the road.
Okay, so I think we're,
Because they're gonna be leasing that property, they want it inside the fence.
Well, I agree with Chris. I think fence line should be back. Fence line should be back 600 feet, not to the solar panel. The fence should be included as far as I'm concerned.
And I'm a give and take guy. I'm okay including the fence 600 feet around a primary dwelling and it being on the fence, on the property line in your scenario earlier where it's property to property, right? Where it's bare ground, there's no reason. We're talking about protecting the rights of the people, the non-participating landowners. And so now if you put it on the property line and then you put your trees are gonna be behind it, you're still gonna be looking at the trees or a fence, 8-foot tall fence all the time. Now in Courtney's defense or in her part, I forgot what you said. I was gonna go with-
well, it gets into boundary disputes
Well, you get to boundary disputes, but,
because of the longevity of the situation.
but to her point, if you do a woven wire fence, it's no different. Like I have a woven wire fence around my property right now. It's only 3 foot, 4 foot tall, but it's still a woven wire fence. I think when you talk to property owners, their biggest issue, and this was where I got 50-50. Because like I said, I tried to go out and talk to people in the county to see who had nothing involved in this. And some of them are like, I don't want to see the solar panels, and half of them are like, I don't want to see the fence at all. So, but I think either way, when you're talking to the non-participating landowners, they want to be impacted as little as possible. My wife, she's like, I don't care. You don't even have to put up a fence or trees. And I'm like, well, apparently we're going to have solar panels around our house. So everybody's different, right? So I look at it, if I've got 5 people who are saying, I don't want to look at a fence, that's 5 people that say they
But
don't
in
want
our
to.
ordinance, Chris,
Yes.
you can build a fence up to the property line, anywhere, in the city here, in the country.
Right.
They have that right as property owners. The adjacent property owners could do the same thing.
Adam Luz has a comment.
Yeah, Adam, go ahead.
I contradict Miss Duffy. The Amboy Township in town requires a 2-foot setback of a fence on a residential lot line so that the property owner can maintain both sides of the fence. and that's on an extremely small lot. I agree that the the fence should be set back. I disagree with concerns over that there's a squabble over where the true property line would be. This does go back to the argument, how much related to agriculture is this versus an industrial site or a commercial site? And I got into the meeting a little bit late when you were all talking about the Farm Bureau and you know, what the root of that is, but the fence should be behind the visual screening. I mean, if you're thinking aesthetically about anything in the county, and that's one of the requirements as to why we're here, the fence should be set back behind the visual screening would be ideal in the layout. There's really concern, I understand, is how does that facility manager access to maintain that setback around that residential site? And I believe that that's where the setback from the roadways comes into play. It's important to set the fence back off the roadway a little bit to allow for a UTV or for a small tractor to get along that right away. I think in a proper layout, they do have complete access around the perimeter, around to those residential sites, if it's laid out properly, and that is to include the fence setback along the roadway and along the residential sites. One of the things when you think about setbacks around the residential property as well, when you talk about trying to minimize taking land out of production and things like that, I mean, you know, please think about the residents that are on these sites when you're thinking about their setbacks around their homes. If we set them back properly, it can be less impactful, and this can go. What it will do, it will have solar developers looking for land that is less grown up, that it's less populated, right? I mean, that's where it's naturally going to place these and manage itself. Where there's conflict is when you try to go where there's 50 homes and all these setbacks and we're wasting all this land. Well, yeah, we are. Maybe we should think about different land to put it, less populated area of the county. So don't be so concerned, I feel like, about trying to push it as close and as tight against everyone that's in these rural communities, because it should naturally manage itself. Just lay it out properly. The concern has been the fence, quite frankly, to a lot of people. And the other aspect I will share is when you're in the country, you have your privacy. I understand that anyone could put a fence up at any time. This is managed by a corporation, a company that does also have language about how they're going to surveil that property. You know, if Mr. Sheline wants to put a fence line up along myself, I don't anticipate Mr. Sheline in an ag setting having, you know, surveillance over that fence and the property line typically in an ag setting. It's like not a neighborly thing that typically happens all that much. But here we're protecting assets, and it's typically vandalism is why they need to have the fence. And so, you know, I mean, that's why this stuff comes up when you're in a rural setting. That is what you enjoy being out here in the country, is your privacy. So when I think there's an aspect of when you push the fence back, you can have surveillance on the fence. That's understandable. I get it. And we have some visual screening that's in front of that. Then I think that it bodes well for that environment. It's less impactful. And those are reasons, you know, that I share with you. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Courtney?
Courtney, go ahead.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. My screen will freeze every once in a while, so I don't mean to keep asking that. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me. Speaking to this fence issue, I want to be real careful in how we characterize it, and I'm not picking at Adam, but he mentions this commercial site and this industrial site. Citing a solar farm in Lee County, according to the ordinance, doesn't change it to commercial. It doesn't change it to industrial. It remains agricultural. So I want to be careful about that distinction that we make. And I think we're walking that fine line too of restricting private property rights. You know, their ability to put up a fence on their property line. And to speak again to Adam's point and using his example, if Jim put the fence up, Jim technically has the right to surveil that fence. That's your private property rights. I also want to clear up, according to the ordinance, and as I understand it, the surveillance on the projects as they've been proposed is only at the entrance of the project and around the substation. So there's not cameras set up all along the fence. And I think that maybe was misunderstood throughout the hearing process. Something to consider, and maybe this is a give and take, Chris, like we've been talking about, if the fence could be set back, 2-3 feet from the property line and maybe a buffer put up on the outskirts of that fence, I think that would be something that the company or any developer would consider. And it kind of fixes that issue. It still keeps the fence relatively close. We've got a line of trees up. I mean, that might be a fix or a compromise that we could make on this.
Okay.
I have a question in regards to the fence, and putting it on the property line, screening and everything. Mr. Sheeline brought up a good question at at the last meeting. He has a 2-story house. 2-story house can be 20 to 30 or 40 feet tall. Put the fence on the property line and then put the screening up. What good's that gonna help him? He looks out the 2nd-story window and sees glass looking at him, the solar panels. I realize that it says that you can do so in the county ordinances, but I tell you what, if it was me, I would adamantly oppose putting a fence, especially if you're gonna put screening there, whether it's in front or in back of the fencing. I would be against putting a fence line on my property. There's a property line there for a reason, and it is to be built on, regardless of what the ordinances say. That's my opinion on it. I do not like a fence on a property line, whether it's in any community, any place.
I think it's difficult to.
I mean, we can sit here
Yeah.
all day
Yep.
and discuss this and argue about it and everything else. I
So-
understand that, but I'm gonna put my opinion here so everybody knows it right from me up front.
Sure. My suggestion, we're at an hour and a half and we have not proceeded beyond where we were last time. I guess we've got a little bit, yes, thank you, on an issue I thought we were done with. But my suggestion.
Let's be fair with both sides of the fence here, not to
Sure.
make a pun out of the situation. We've
No.
got participants and non-participants. And
Yep, no, that's
I
good.
think they're entitled to their beliefs and the way they would like to have their property as it's been set up.
Absolutely. So my suggestion would be, is that on this, I think we've heard on the setbacks that generally we're where we need to be, but we would like to clarify the roadway setbacks. And I'd like to take a stab with Mrs. Duffy, to incorporate what we've talked about into this, that we would review and approve at our next session. We have not talked about screening, and I think it might be helpful to proceed to that discussion a little bit, just to see where.
You want to take 5 minutes?
Yes, I think that would be good. I do have another meeting for the county here at 11, so we will need to adjourn.
So I'm gonna
Adjourn.
3-minute break.
Yeah, so we'll take a 5-minute break right now and re-adjourn. Thank you.
Okay, it's unmuted.
Okay, thank you. We're reconvening our meeting of the Solar Ordinance Ad Hoc Committee. What I would like to do with our remaining time, we've got about 20 minutes, is to talk a bit about screening. And that was the other topic that I guess hot topic, and related topic, and impactful to the non-participating parties. And I guess what I would like to do, I don't know, is Adam still with us? I know you made some comments, Adam, and I would open it to you if you have any comments on the screening piece. I think beyond what you said.
I'm trying to get him unmuted.
Sure.
Hold on, Adam, if you're talking, hopefully I'm catching you in between breaths.
Is Courtney still with us? Or
Courtney had to step off.
oh, okay.
No. For some reason, it's not letting me unmute.
Is he muted on his end?
Adam, are you muted?
Send him a message to see if he's ready.
So can I go, Dave?
Sure.
In regards to screening,
I apologize. I had stepped away from the computer, everyone, if you were trying to unmute me.
So Adam, what we were wanting to do in our last 20 minutes here was to talk about screening, and I know you've made some comments kind of where your view of that is. Did you have anything else that you'd like to add to the screening section discussion?
I don't have all my notes in front of me, and I'm not sure how much or at what length you've talked about visual screening or how descriptive, but I would hope that we would have obviously description in there, specifically of low growing trees, like a couple of rows of low growing trees and some definition as to what size they are when they're planted and how well they should be maintained and things like that. So that it doesn't fall off, and die, or if it doesn't get established well, that there's some parameters there. I also, in the visual screening, would like to know, like, I do wish that the county was asking for better visual impact studies to be done when it goes to for approval for non-participating residents, as you've talked about. If the land slopes away from a residential house, irregardless of what the setbacks are, similar to like a computer animated deal of a kitchen or something like that, like a 2020 program. I mean, I feel like the companies could provide a little better scenario of, here is the view from the elevation of your property, and this is what the visual impact is going to be. And that's maybe a little bit more in depth than just what the ordinance is, allowed to do. So
I have a question for Adam. Adam, in any zoning situation, where is it stated in any ordinance that a view is regulated?
It's not as much the regulation. I think it comes back to asking for these impacts, so that when the site is looking to be approved or denied, that information is given, so that the visual impact is provided. It's not just an assumed, many of the ZBA haven't maybe stood from a property or here or there.
But Adam, that wasn't my question. My question was, in any other zoning ordinance, where is view regulated?
Visual impact pertains to view, Mr. Sheeline, and it is in, there is wording to this topic in some ordinances, or there's language available. I could pull some of the language of what is being asked. I'm not in what I've offered to you. I'm not telling you about regulating it. I'm telling you about providing the visual impact, the example of what it will be.
In the ordinance that we have right now, I am guessing that they're using the term buffer, the same as screening, but it does say the buffer shall be installed during construction of the SES and shall be maintained in perpetuity with the SES. If the screening foliage drops below the height of 7 feet, the buffer shall be replaced within the next growing season. And then there's an incompletion on the following sentence. Failure to install the buffer at a conclusion of construction of the SES. Some language there, and there's another place where they're talking about 15-foot trees. I'd have to go back and look for that, but there is some language there regarding whether there's bushes or trees used.
Yeah, so we had it given to us from, I believe, Courtney. Was that correct, Dave? Yeah. This updated one kind of came to us. And per what we talked about last time, I think we talked about removing the topography piece to it. It kind of leaves it open and void to who's identifying the topography piece. I think you make it a very clear cut, 1,000 feet from the dwelling, and that's that. Like, they know going into it, like, it's easy. It's 1,000 feet any direction from the dwelling. That's how much we need. I don't care what your topography is. I also believe, I do like the idea of woven wire fence. All the places where it does say 7 feet, I'd love to change that to 8 feet. I think that's pretty minor. If given the fact that I know Adam's concerns about a fence being around the property, I'll guarantee you, not putting words in Adam's mouth, but if he has to live with either chain link or a woven wire, he's going to take all 8-foot woven wire. I think it's not much to ask that it goes to 8 feet, and once again, even as a concession, as somebody who's looking at it, I say 8 feet and give them the next few years to get to 8 feet, right? Per what Courtney had sent us. So start off at 3 feet, get to 8 feet in 4 years. Like there's got to be concessions to it, right? So other than that, I thought it was really, really well written. I thought it hit on a lot of the topics that we discussed.
Any other comments on that?
So I want to go through I. I is the heart of the screening section.
Mm-hmm.
This is the red line.
Because I gotta read it. Okay, so and yours is I. Oh, mine is 1.
And yours it's what? 1. Oh, it's 1. Oh, it is 1. It's not. I stand corrected. So it's J 1.
You're welcome.
Weird, thank you. Looks like I with a dot. Anyway. Okay, with the exception of the participating landowner. And of course, going through this, David, because this is what we've got adopted. This is what's on the books right now. A visual screen shall be provided for any part of the SES that is visible to and located within 1,000 feet of an existing dwelling or residential district. And that makes an exception. And that's if the exception is if the developer submits a landscape plan prepared by an Illinois registered landscape architect. So I have a real problem with that sentence because it's extraordinarily vague. A visual screen shall be provided for any part of the SES that is visible. Now, is that the SES that's visible that's 2 miles away? Half mile away? 3/4 of a mile away? 50 feet away? I don't know what that means.
It says 1,000 feet. So, and I'm right with you, Jim. I believe you removed the landscape and per what Courtney said, the photography portion that's in there. You remove that and just make it a clear cut 1,000 feet. 1,000 feet, any direction. Like, we can't, yeah, you're gonna have hills that go up the side, things that go down. Like, you can't always make everything perfect. I think you just pick a number and you live with it. I'd like 1,500.
Okay, I must be dense. So what are we talking about? 1,000 feet of what?
Well, it says if
Back to the light.
existing dwelling or residential district.
So I
It
think
might
that's,
be a little vague, but
as we were talking about boundaries, we have 600 feet from the foundation. This requires 1,000.
But this is, we're looking.
Right.
This isn't a measurement. This is looking.
No, so 600 feet to here. Let's just say it's there to there, 600 feet, right? Our fence is right here. Our solar panels are gonna start here and here and here, right?
Okay.
1,000 feet will go, because remember, it's gonna be a circle. So now let's say it's 1,000 feet. It has to, your shrubs, we'll call X's trees, right? Your trees have to go 1,000 feet instead of the 600 feet. So it's gonna extend beyond the 600 feet.
It's going to extend on both sides.
Correct, yes.
Okay, now I'll give you a different question.
Okay.
Now you've got a piece of property that sits on the corner and the solar farm is only one direction. Then you say 1,000 feet, does that mean you have to go 1,000 feet down the road on the other side or only 500, which would be half of the 1,000 feet because there's no solar farm
So
to one side?
So it will cross the road. It's got to grandfather into the other side of the road.
I understand it grandfathers into the other side of the road. You're saying you have to go down the other road?
Like in this scenario, in that scenario, you're gonna have to go east.
And let's say the solar farm is across the road on there.
Yep.
So do you go 500 feet there and then there is no solar farm on this side? So when you say 1,000 foot of screening, are you now making it so that you have to go 1,000 feet one direction? Because you've said 1,000 foot of screening. Or is it 500 feet on each side of the residence?
No, it's 1,000 feet. It's a diameter, right? So I'm just gonna try to put this better in the center. So house is here, or property's there, house is here. Let's say this line, try to do it fancy. That's a 600 foot line, right?
Okay.
So you can't have any solar panels in this. Well, this property has solar, this one doesn't, that's pretty easy. But then let's say that's 1,000 foot. They only have to put along there. Well, and then I guess they'd have to go back too, because it'd be inside of the 1,000 foot. There's no reason that they don't have to go up here.
But if there's nothing on the other side of the road, why do you screen farther down that way? Because it's not visible from that house. Yes.
Once again, you're gonna have scenarios where.
I understand. So I'm just trying to ask the question. Is 1,000 feet basically from the center line of the house, looking across the road, is it 1,000 feet all the way around? Or by saying it's 1,000 feet, are you requiring them to go further up the road?
You're saying this way or this way.
Yep, yes. Because technically you shouldn't have to go.
You shouldn't have to go this way.
That's correct.
I agree. So
So basically what you're saying is the 1,000 feet is from the center line of the road or the center line of the house.
So 1,000 feet, right? And as long as it incorporates into the solar project. I get what you're saying. I totally. How do you word every single scenario? Because like, if you put.
That's why you have an attorney up here.
Yeah.
You make his life complicated, he makes us, like Congress, a 6,000 page bill.
Right,
No matter how you word it, there's always gonna be someone that's gonna have a problem.
right.
You know I look for exceptions.
Oh, no.
And so I think when you look at that, you're asking. I don't know how you answer that, right, Bruce? Like, I agree that this probably doesn't need to have there, but if.
So do
how do you write
you start at the center line of the house? And as long as you're within the solar farm, then you go both directions. But otherwise, if you're in that situation, you only go one direction. So do you put something in concerning?
Can you have it so that it's 1,000 feet adjacent to the property where the project is located?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Say that again?
1,000 feet adjacent to the property where the project is located.
So in this case, they wouldn't have to have any screening. Because that's not adjacent.
Oh, it's not adjacent.
Across the street is considered adjacent.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but this would.
That wouldn't be there.
On that scenario, Chris, using the road, I'm gonna say north and south,
This road?
yes.
Yep.
As far as line of view, you are only gonna need to go so far to the north on that road with a buffer or whatever we're gonna call it.
You're saying this one.
And basically same as the other way. I didn't use the word topography because we're getting away from that, but line of view, you're gonna need to go so far as where that house is.
I don't think this is the scenario that we're trying to protect as much as the guy who's.
I understand, but somebody's going to interpret it that I'm allowed,
1,000 feet.
yes. And so it'll end up being larger than what, or they'll assume.
Because in reality, Bruce, is what's gonna happen is this fence is gonna go somewhere like that, right? They're just gonna take it.
Yes.
That's gonna happen. They're not gonna have that curve, right?
You may not even have the one on the bottom just because you're not gonna have any visual of it.
My understanding of the buffer itself is that it is the fence, ideally from a developer standpoint, they would like to put the fence to avoid disputes of boundary lines, put the fence on property line and put the screening directly behind the fence. Is that a correct understanding?
I can understand it, but I don't think that I would agree to it. Aesthetically, they're trying to prevent looking out the back window, looking at the fence. If, you know, go ahead.
Yeah, typically, what we would do in places where we would have the screening required, you know, adjacent to a property owner, is we would set the fence back and put the trees in. To allow for healthy growth of the trees, and also we want those trees to be further from the panels to prevent shading. And it's easier for them to be on the outside of the fence.
So can you come up and use the whiteboard for me and let me? So in what you just said, take all of this.
Okay.
So. I love it. So house property, right? Where if this is this is on the farm, this is non-participating landowner.
Okay.
Where's the trees and where's the fence?
Okay.
In your scenario, because you guys are easy to work with.
Okay, so what we would do, right, yeah. So what we would do is, we would figure out, so this is whatever the buffer is,
Yep.
what we would refer to it as a buffer. So this would be the buffer, for the, 1,000 feet or whatever it is, it would obviously be squared off, but we would put the trees. And we typically do a double row, so they're offset. They tend to live longer and they're healthier. So we do double row, and then the fence goes then behind there. Wherever the trees, wherever the trees go. So we put the trees up to as close to the property line as feasible, and then the fence goes behind that.
And I think that's what we're asking for, like.
So, and it would just be in those particular situations, and sometimes what works.
My turn.
What we do is we give the property owners the option is if they want the trees on their property and then the fence behind them.
You're willing to work with them.
We're willing to work with them because some people at the end of the project, then we're gonna pull all those trees out. Because the farmer doesn't want trees on property he's gonna farm. So we offer to plant those trees on the private property because those will stay and people like trees. So we offer that, and whether or not they want them or not is up to them.
This goes back to you guys being easier to work with. It's the next project that comes in and the next project.
Right.
Mike and I can agree to this all day. This is all we're asking for.
Right.
If you're gonna put the fence in front of the buffer strip, well, then you might as well put the solar panels 5 feet past the buffer, because it really doesn't matter.
So-
Like, that's my argument. You might as well get rid of the 600 feet, make it 5, and call it good.
I'm gonna have to call us to a conclusion here. I did want to get input on this, and I guess I appreciate the input that we
You worked
received.
so hard on it. I worked so hard on it.
Can I just quickly raise the question so that we're thinking, so 600 feet. So under the language that we have, we got a row of panels here that's within 1,000 feet. So are we requiring screening here?
If it's within 1,000 feet of the residence, then yes, even if it crosses the road. But you have to remember, you've got 600 feet to work with. Or in this case, you're gonna have 50 feet to work with.
So I'm not understanding what we're doing.
I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to.
I know.
I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second. Recess.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes the meeting.
Do we want to set a date? Oh, yeah, we gotta set a date. Reconvene.
We've got to look at how it would publish and that type of thing, and availability. I'm sorry, but I do have to.
No, that's fine. We'll figure it out as we say here. And then remember, next week's committee week, so. I'm not.
Be available but remotely.
Next week.
But not
You're
Florida.
gonna, you're
Not
gonna,
Florida.
you're gonna have fun. I chaired my transportation committee remotely. and
Did
that
you?
was-
Oh, yeah.
That sucked. It just, I'll just say it just sucked. Good luck.
I was, what's that? I say we do it the 9th.
Thank you.
How's everybody doing on the 9th? At 9?
I'm good. Mike?
All right, well,
The 19th, 9.